spots throughout the tour, so we'll be able to get a little bit more deeper exposure in some certain locations. But for the 2/3 tour that we're going to get, we're going to try to hit some locations on the grounds and also give you a little history, but also just try to keep you warm, so we'll be going to different little microclimates, which is also going to be an important part of coming to understand the landscape here. Okay, so first point of view here that we need to take is just sort of act like, from a permaculture lens, that we are a big a hawk or something flying above the terrain, and we're looking down, and sort of that top view. So we're sitting in front of the house here, and then in that top view, I just want you to understand that the south is that way, and we're working on a northerly slope. All right, and then to our east is the Baker River Valley. So we're in the Baker River Valley watershed, which the height of the land on that is Mount Moosilauke, which is like 4,800 feet up the valley, and that's the beginning of our watershed, and it tapers down towards Plymouth, where it joins the Pemigewasset, and then the Pemigewasset goes into the Merrimack, which goes into the Atlantic. So that's sort of the breadth of our watershed. What goes into the Baker River from us is the south branch of the Baker River. So that's where we are as far as the watershed, geographically speaking. We're like at 42 degrees latitude, there's and we get about 40 inches of rain a year.
And not too far to the west of here, you go into the Connecticut River watershed and out to the coast of Connecticut. So totally, not that far away.
You have a real division there in the type of soil, a little bit in the climate as well. Alright, so moving ahead, just in terms of the history of this place, this place was originally settled in the early 1800s. The house across the street, we found a newspaper in the wall and it says 18 whatever. We just found some coins the other day with 1830 on it. So 1830s we'll date it. Folks moved up here, and you can see behind the oxen over there the remnants of, say, stone walls. And as we're walking around, you'll see a lot more of that. There's stone walls crisscrossing the property. More or less, the efforts they were undertaking, the agricultural efforts were sheep. And they did a lot of cutting of the forest, probably made a lot of charcoal, sort of some forest products, and then started grazing sheep. And that's the history of that. Is then this town proliferated and grew rapidly over a short period of time till, say, the 1850s. And then the combination of the Industrial Revolution that was starting to take place, that was pulling people to the mill towns, and the Civil War, and the Western expansion. Ohio was really opening it up. This town, the population peaked about 3,000, and then fell to when my aunt and uncle moved here in the 1940s. There was about 90 people here. So it is a really, it's like an expansion and then a rapid decline. And I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from that period. I think people were, by and large, one-dimensional in their economy. It was really based on the sheep economy, which was tough on the land, and economically it didn't work out. As the market sort of fell right out from under it. So the lessons to be learned, I think, is to care for the land, care for the soil, and develop a diverse economy that can withstand depressions and fluctuations. So we're trying to learn from those lessons. Another facet of just what we do here, we haven't had a chance really to give a lot of DAcres history. DAcres, when we started, we always had this idea of incorporating learners, sort of as much as ourselves, we consider ourselves lifelong learners. The process of DAcres really intrigued us a lot, the ability to allow people to come for shorter and longer periods of time. Sort of the wolfing model was something that we looked at to begin with. So when DAcres began, the sort of concept was to incorporate wolfers and learners and have a market garden of the style that's like Elliott Coleman style. So really, we'd come from the West Coast, where people were charging like $17, $18 a pound for salad greens. and just like an unlimited market for those sort of products. You know, like really people are affluent and well into specialty vegetables and stuff like that. So we're really willing to pay top dollar for that kind of food product. And here, when we moved here, we discovered lots of things. We didn't have the growing season of the West Coast. You know, some of the times in the West Coast, the Pacific Northwest, the ground doesn't freeze all winter. You can grow a lot of greens if the ground doesn't freeze all winter, especially with season extension. But here, it's sort of a slow time in the winter. It's really hard to pull off a four-season crop with regularity and with to be able to do it for market without a lot of inputs, heating, and so forth. It is definitely possible to do it, but for more subsistence than I think for commercial market, unless you do use heaters and so forth. So for me, I think when we arrived, we had this sort of ideal of what we were going to become, and it's changed through the process of coming here and observing and looking at the situation, the socioeconomic situation, and sort of our interests and the land base is what really we have built this farm based on those observations versus our preconceived expectations. In as much as anything, our design currently is based on having 4 or 5 people live here over the winter, maybe 10 to 12 living here in the summer, with the goals of having an educational experience here, having a lot of experimentation here, having a lot of demonstration for people here, for the public and for the people working here, and then a lot of actualization. So we want to be actually sort of doing farming instead of it being like a viewing box type operation. So with those goals in mind is how we've designed this space. So some of those goals sort of interrelate. Like sometimes we'll have a lot of effort and energy put into, say, paths and to get somewhere type thing. Really working a lot on our infrastructure as far as transportation, more or less. And some of that is based on what we need for our farm activities. And some of that is based on when Grandma and 3 of her kids or toddlers show up and they take off running one direction, and she's got to know that that she can keep a line of eyesight on them, and she can that's okay because they know where to go. So there's multiple functionality there. Another thing to just begin the dialogue and start thinking about is during this class we're going to do some project work in the field around. And the project that I think we're having in mind, and Nick's probably going to be working on it more specifically, is to design more permanent housing for the folks that would live and work at DAcres. So this project is really in the conception phase. We haven't gone much further than what I've just told you. But for a long time here, we've lived in houses like shanty-type structures. You see that tree house in front of you? That's actually suspended amongst 4 trees, that structure straight ahead across the oxen pasture. And it is great fun to live in a tree house and all that. It's super nice, but maybe from March to November. Because from November to March, it's more challenging. It's just not very well insulated, and probably not the place you want to grow old. And so for us, this is a great place to start, a great place for summer housing and so forth. But we've realized that if we're going to attract and retain people with more permanence here, we're going to need some more permanent dwellings, some places they can call home. So this is what we need to do. And we're going to be incorporating this class to help solve this dilemma as far as the design. So the option in the big picture, we're looking for a place where we can kaplunk a house and a dwelling, and potentially we could also kaplunk some more houses. And that's sort of yet to be determined if we would kaplunk, or if that house would stand alone and we put kaplunk over here. But that's the basis for beginning this pot of stewing. Okay. All right. Is there anything else that we could catch up on, sort of housekeeping or anything else before we start walking around and doing stuff? Time to start walking around and do stuff.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add is what you and I talked about this morning, just that, I mean, this is kind of an orientation to the site for you guys, so some of it would be pointing out places where people can camp, places where people can find bathroom, stuff like that. So feel free to ask questions, too, along the lines of just orienting yourself.
Super. Okay, so one thing before we start moving, because we still seem fairly warm right here, is this is going to be a major shift change this summer. In the area where Steve's standing, we're going to go and put a solarium. So this will be coming out, protruding off the building about 20 feet from the whole width of the building. And the floor height will be the same as the interior floor height, so it'll be somewhat elevated. But basically it's a glass room. And so that'll give us a lot more potential for season extension, for starting our plants. We're starting a lot of plants in the basement, you'll see. So we need to have more ability to interface with our wood boiler and our solar heating, and have sort of a heated pad to start growing starts in the springtime with natural light. And that's the idea, and extend the season better in the fall, as well as heat the building better, have a better source of passive solar. So that's in the works.
And you get the overflow for breakfast and everything. So
we could be eating our lunch out there instead. It'd be nice. Cool. So that's going to be in the works throughout the summer. And just remember, everything's facing the south. Like all these decisions and sort of this landscape and everything is really about capturing the solar energy.
And just from a design perspective, Josh, you planned on this from the initial design of the house.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just phased down the road.
Phase 6 here, we'll call it. Oh, yeah, it's one of those things that we sort of just ran out of steam there at the end of this construction project, and I'm glad that we've taken up the course. Seems like the right time to do it. All right, let's get moving. Keep the little steps. First, this is what we call the big cold frame. So I guess I just like everybody to sort of take in the difference in the atmosphere. The massive reduction of the breeze that we just felt when we were walking across, the wind chill has just been reduced. I saw a couple of people like pull back their hoodies when we got in here. It's a lot warmer. We probably got 10 to 15 degrees in here. And the door is wide open. So it's just sort of this structure that we haven't put that much into, but glazing. So you got your greenhouse effect. We often look at it as just, people notice how warm their car got while it was sitting in a parking lot all day with just the windows rolled up. Yeah. It's the greenhouse effect. So anytime you can add 10 to 15 degrees to your growing environment, it's just like moving all of a sudden the farm to southern Massachusetts. It's really a cool thing to be able to do by just building a structure. Nick was in here earlier in the week, just more or less potting up these brassicas. So you got a lot of kale and collards and broccoli. Anything else, Nick? Cabbage?
That's pretty much it. Lettuces. No lettuces. Spinach.
So the idea is this space is more or less our potting shed. So we'll be taking things and potting them up, and then the next phase will be going directly to the field plantings. With the live edge, because otherwise you're just going to come up with like a very small piece of dimensional lumber, and so you get more strength from this, and if it's curved, in this case you get more utility. It sort of fits in nice as a brace, and it works real well. Good times. So we should speak to this as well. There's another it's a nice component of what DAcres offers is overnight accommodations. So you'll notice a lot of people showing up while you're here. They're staying overnight and so forth. It's a way that we generate revenue and also figure out it's a great way to get this information to the general public. People that come here for recreational purposes and so forth might not be anticipating farm fresh meals and using composting toilets and all the renewable energy strategies that we have here. But when they arrive and they're exposed to it, they take something away from it. especially if they enjoy the food, the toilets didn't stink, the energy systems are all working, as they should. It's really, it can be a super positive experience for folks. So that whole component is, it's just this multifunctionality once again. You got revenue, you're meeting your educational goals. It really works nicely, hand in hand. The 5-gallon bucket stack are really about gleaning and getting the municipal waste stream, so taking as much of it as we can. These potatoes came from the supermarket where they were probably in one of those big bags, and they're either dated or one of them went bad in the bag. So they had to get rid of the whole bag. They don't have a mechanism for making like potato salad in the store, but that's a whole nother thing. But so at this point, we're going to the back door, and 6 days a week they're giving us all this food that's dated. So lots of bananas, lots of grapes, greens, stuff that is very much edible. And so it's a real shame that our food system is not set up better, and that between 1.25 of all the food produced goes to waste. But if it is ended up otherwise in a landfill, we try to snatch it and use it up. So this goes to the chickens, the grapes, and the greens, but the rest of these 5-gallon buckets go to our pigs.
That wasn't dinner tonight?
This is not dinner tonight, no. But there's just a lot of waste in the system. We go to grocery stores, we go to the university, we go to a lot of Main Street businesses, and just get coffee grounds as well. Just anything that otherwise get landfilled that's organic material. Trying to pick up, bring up here onto the hill, and then use that to energize our soil system. So instead of burying this somewhere, we want to bring it here and incorporate it into the soil. Organic material, minerals, nutrients. And then this cardboard is another, it's just a waste stream. Alright, this stuff is getting harder and harder to get rid of. Like some businesses have to pay for people to come pick it up. There is a recycling stream, but it's not a really good recycling stream. What we do, by and large, is pack this stuff up in the containers that merchandise has been brought to us from China. We pack this up, and that's what gets sent on the return trip. And I'm involved with the recycling business a little bit, and there's just been a real big crackdown in China because they're really sick of taking our trash. Like, we do a very poor job of recycling in this country, and they've had enough of it, so to speak. So now if one of those giant boxes goes over, it costs $2,000 to get over there because there's a great need for getting stuff over there. And they've already made the trip over here. And it's $4,000 to go back. So next time that a bad shipment gets to China and they send it back, like we get charged the $4,000 on top of what we paid $2,000 to get it over there. So what that means is the recycling is going to get worse in this country instead of better. Because we just aren't using the stuff. And we've been trying to more or less send our trash to China, and they're not going to have it anymore.
I think we send a lot of clothes over there too, don't we?
I think that's a problem as well, the fiber market. So right now what we're looking at doing is making use of it here and selectively where we can. So we get stuff that doesn't have a lot of ink in it, and we've been using it as sheet mulching. It's more or less lasagna gardening by another name. And its real purpose is to suppress existing vegetation. So we could lay it down on like sod, or lay it down in a landscape that has a very vigorous vegetation, like brambles or something. Lay it down super heavy and then cover it with organic material to keep it from blowing away. And it will suppress the existing vegetation. So then we can grow something else there. Because that in the big picture, like we are totally blessed up here with northern forest. We got about 20 species of really cool trees, but amongst those 20 trees, you only really got acorns to eat. And it's hard to live on acorns. So to be successful, what we're looking at here is a species recomposition. Like the forest is really nice species ecology, an ecological system. The forest is a great thing and very important. So we're looking to continue a forest, but recompose the species. So the big picture there is trying to use that pine tree to make tomatoes or rice. And so that's the journey we're on here. I think the other option too is to make mushrooms. You're just looking for different ways to build protein and caloric value out of this forest composition is very hard. So we're looking to introduce new species over time. Hey, check it out. There's an outhouse over here. We might as well stop and chat. The elevated leg platform really helps your posture. So squatting is important. It's not just sitting on a throne. But yeah, feel free to use this regularly. But yeah, I like it very much. Very comfortable place to sit. So at this location, we're just buzzing through. We're looking at the ox house. These are the oxen. They do a lot of work for us. Pulling anything heavy, logs, stones. We don't have, we do have a skid steer, but we don't have necessarily a tractor or anything else to pull stuff. So these guys are really reliable for that activities. And they're also just super crucial for the soil building. Piles like that. It's just wonderful. That's fertility. Very, very crucial component of why the oxen are here. If we're looking at this house we got here, let's just check out super nice hat and super good boots. We haven't got the gutters up yet, but we're collecting rainwater whenever we can. But otherwise, you can see this area right here is going to be where more splash and more accumulation of water is going to happen. Just how the roof line is. All the rain that's hitting further up is ending up right here on this edge. So it's very important to kick up the stem wall where you're going to have splash. Otherwise, it's going to rot your sill, which is going to kill your building. Buildings don't generally spontaneously collapse. They either rot from the sills, rot from the boots, or something's wrong with the roof. You get a roof leak. So if you build this nice hat that protects your boots, you're going to get a long life. You can really see in this structure right here the damage and degradation caused by exposure to moisture. Like we leave this door open excessively, you just forget it. And you can really see like how the wood right here is deteriorating. And sort of the rot. Whereas here, it's really well preserved. It's just an effect of the amount of moisture that it's being exposed to. Moisture and sunlight. Woo-wee! Hard on stuff. Any thoughts, questions, comments?
Why the window so high?
Well, the oxen have horns. I was always scared the oxen would stick their horns through it. And then, as far as the pitch of the roof, the overhang and so forth, it allows the winter sun to get in there. But the summer sun is almost directly overhead, so it keeps it shady. So that's the design with that. Further. This is what I really like. When I start seeing these old stumps doing this business, I'm just imagining that happen, like, as much tree as there is above ground, there's usually at least that volume below ground. So I'm just imagining all that happening below ground. That looks like just wonderful plant food and just like a vascular network below ground. Another thing while we're here, along these different little rows throughout, when we were building this area, we raked down a lot of debris and built these little swales for moisture retention and just for erosion control in case we had a big event, 7 inches of rain or something like that. It really starts to move across the slope. It's nice to have those sort of safety. And then within that is where we've chosen to go ahead and start planting our fruit trees for the next level. Because you figure that apple tree was planted last year, is, smaller than that. It's going to get a little bit bigger, but you may not even see an apple for 5 to 7 years. After that, you don't really get bushel until it's about 10, 15 years old. So there's a long time before the breadth of the aerial parts of this tree begin to interfere with growing annuals and herbs all around it. So we got 10 or 15 years really to grow in the understory, and during that time we're also building the soil for the future of that apple. So it's a transitional process. From going from this forest behind you to raising pigs, to doing potatoes and annuals, to having a 75-year-old forest garden. That's just a long period of time, but each period of time is also productive. This period of time we're harvesting forest products. This period of time we're harvesting potatoes, working into our orchard and herbal nursery perennial development.
What are some of the other types of trees you put into these swales, like apples?
Lots of pears, traditional crops, cherries, and so forth. I think apples really are bread and butter, but we do love an Asian pear. We try all sorts of oddball stuff, medlars and nut trees, and just mixing in all kinds of stuff. If you have any obscure fruits that you really love, like pawpaw or medlar, persimmon, the kiwis or something like that, we can definitely talk more specifics about that, because we have pretty much examples of everything cooking.
Yeah, pawpaw.
Yeah, there's some pawpaws up here.
I was at a forest garden in Rockingham, Vermont last week, and he had medlar planted, but he'd never tasted it, so I told him he'd never been here. I told him you'd like it. I said, you gotta go see that.
It's tasty. These obscure fruits are super, super delectable. What we had last night, we had some sort of Eleagnus. It was like an autumn olive custard or something like that. It was so good. It was really tasty.
Delicious.
All right, well, let's move down the slope, and we can see sort of the progression through the years, saying this was just last year. Okay, so this is an area that's a little further developed. If that was last year, then this was 2 years ago. And, you can really see the soil is just ridiculously nice. It's just so primo. That is not New Hampshire, alright? So if anyone knows a place in New Hampshire you can find stuff that looks like that, you're in the right spot. But this is a hard one. Definitely a lot of work went into that, but once you got it, bam, you can do a lot with it. So where you're standing is mostly white clover, Dutch white clover, in all the paths, so that comes up as leguminous and holds the soil, and you can cut it and throw it right on as the mulch. And then I would, if you do notice, just try to have an eye for specific locations that maybe the mulch didn't cover it all the way or whatnot, and start having an idea of just the dramatic effects of erosion. I just look at this I see bare ground, and it sort of, makes me quiver a little. It's just a different composition. You see how it's sheeted over and covered in a way that underneath here, it's sort of like there's all these different vascular channels and everything more. There's more abundance of it. If you look under an area that's had the mulch, it's more porous. Whereas this is hard, and it won't take a rain shower and won't absorb it as readily. As when a raindrop hits this, it disperses and permeates. Whereas it hits this, it bounces off and works away, or bounces the soil in different directions as well. It's just amazing. The power of wind and water erosion is substantial. It just cannot be, you can't underestimate it. And it happens on such a molecular level that you have to recognize it and prevent it.
So that's
Just a big, the bread and butter, like when I grew up, I told you I grew up in North Carolina and whatnot, and soil conservation was happening all around us. It was just a huge issue. And it was like in the news nightly, like so, because you'd see it in the ditches, like flowing away, like down water every time it rained, and it was just from the techniques we were using. You know, if you take a plow to your soil 6-8 times a year, it just destroys the composition and just makes it so readily susceptible to wind and water erosion. It's just, and then another factor, like when you take a plow to this area or something repeatedly, year after year, you get what's called a plow pan. So every year that equipment runs at that certain depth and shears the earth with pressure, metal pressure on that every single year, and it creates a layer that's virtually impenetrable. So that's why when you ride around often and see agricultural fields, especially that have been beat down a lot, you'll see standing water this time of year. Like, why doesn't it just drain in? It's because it can't. It's in a kiddie pool. It's literally standing in a kiddie pool. And when that kiddie pool effect happens, when you have 12 inches of water, standing water, nothing can live in that. That becomes anaerobic. Like things will live fine in soil that's got a high water content, but they don't grow well in a pond. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Soil, it's a different, you need air in soil. Otherwise, it's going to rot. And that's basically what's happening in lots of cases. Is there's no life in these fields. All right, so this is phase 3. This has been for a couple years now. So at this point, like we're taking these deluxe beds that have all been prepped in the soil. You saw how rich the soil is. Now we can start thinking about other crops, perennialized crops. So on our list are herbs, culinary plants, culinary and medicinal, and then like small fruit, blueberries, or rhubarb, or the apple-pear combo. So sort of this whole area is set up to be facing the sun with a low-growing layer. This is horehound and sage, and there was some antithyp growing in there last year. And then into like a shrub layer, where this is blueberries and rhubarb, and then into a tree layer. So sort of facing up towards the sun, collecting all that energy spatially. And so this area is designed to give us yields for the next, 50 years. Just getting the right composition of plants in there. And getting them established so they're low maintenance. So we don't have a weed problem. The 4th year. So you sort of see that progression, yeah? From the little whip to something that's a little bit more substantial. Here's what we did, like a bunch of peas last year. And then down here at the bottom, we done, last year, we planted a considerable amount of like bort nuts and phylazels. And there's a bunch of currants in between as well. So it's more of a nut section, but we like it right here for these big, tall things. Because this roadway, we're not going to be growing anything in this roadway. We'll probably always have an access road through here, so we can go tall and big. We're not really worried about shade and stuff behind it. So this is where, on the bottom of the slope here, is where we're growing the biggest stuff over time. All right. So you can tell we're sort of hoarders. It's the problem I have. Me and my father, really terrible genetic disease. We collect stuff and can't get rid of it. But so the idea is, also my favorite program watching up on television was Sanford and Son. So this is all coming together here. But basically, you just hate buying stuff, and you hate going and buying something new that, even if they recycle it, it's more just downcycling stuff. So if we take some chimney pipe and melt it down and send it to China, and they send us back more chimney pipe, well, weren't we better off just using the old chimney pipe where we can, stuff like that. obviously everything. Some stuff has a limited lifetime, and you can. There's always a time to clean up. So yeah, Piglandia. We had pigs in here historically, and then we brought them back this winter, and sort of had them in a little confined area, and then I think it was 3 days. It was on Wednesday. We cut out that fence and expanded it. So they're just loving it. They're down there just like in fresh dirt and just having a really good time with it. You can really, it's one of the great things about raising these animals. When you get pigs on fresh dirt, and you get ducks in the water and stuff like that, it's remarkable. They just really enjoy the heck out of it. Their tails start wagging, they start running around, and they just seem so much more healthy and happy. So it's one of the joys of raising animals. And at the same time, when you can expand their yard. Work for us right now. The idea is to get down that vegetation again and then come in there and plant something else. Because the vegetation that's in there right now is it's really a quick growing ground cover that no pasture animal seems to like. Like a bunch grass.
Do they have access to one of the ponds?
They do have access to one of the ponds, and that was debatable in terms of what we wanted to do with these different water bodies, whether to reintroduce them to that. But we felt like overall that pond was still accessible if we needed to get in there and do some digging out. And we just started adding the facility at this level, continuing to work it down the slope. So it definitely was almost a toss-up in terms of where we were heading with that. Alright, Bigville. You guys are welcome. They're really getting into the brambles over there. They seem to be super into that right now.
You're saying we stink.
Yeah. Guilty and you